Well, after that musical introduction, boys and girls, what can I say? Well, welcome to this morning's assembly. I'm seated here at a desk in the rectory, and I'm at my old childhood computer. This is called a BBC Micro. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of a BBC Micro computer before. If you have, well done. They were made in the 1980s by, you've guessed it, the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. And if your school was lucky at the time, back in the early 1980s, most schools in Ireland had one of these, and my school had one, just one computer in the entire school. But at the time we thought it was absolutely amazing. We couldn't get over it. We thought it was the bee's knees. We used to love computer class, and we'd be broken up into groups of two, and we'd have a couple of minutes on the computer just playing around with different things. But it was my first introduction to a computer, and some years later I was delighted to be able to have a BBC all of my own and to play games on. Now I'm just going to show you a computer game here. First of all, not sure if you can see that. This is for holding a cassette tape. Now the cassette tape is in the machine, and that's what in the tape recorder rather, and that's where the game is. It's I'm not sure if you've maybe you've not heard of a cassette tape before. This is a musical cassette tape. So you see, maybe there are some lying around at home, but you can have music and computer games on a cassette tape, and you put it into a tape recorder which is connected to the computer, and you play the game from there. So the game we're going to play just briefly is Bandits at 3 o'clock. It's about dog fights. Have you ever heard of dog fights? Not fortunately not about one dog attacking another. There are planes in the sky trying to shoot one another down, and that's called a dog fight. And Bandits at 3 o'clock. Early pilots would use the face of the clock to measure direction by. So 12 o'clock would be directly in front of you, 1 o'clock would be there, 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock would be to your left. Likewise, 9 o'clock would be on the other side of you. Okay, so we'll give this a go. So instructions Y or N, so that's asking me, do I want instructions on how to play the game? So I'll say no. I press N. You see, oh, very good. Now let me see, so press space. This is the space bar, and this is my joystick. Very basic looking joystick. I'm sure you've oh, press fire. So my man is running to his aeroplane. There we go. Oops. Oh. Oops. Well, I've crashed. So I've another chance now to shoot down the other guy. Well, as you can probably see, guys, it's some years since I've played that particular game. I'm not particularly good at it. I'll leave it there for the moment. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this computer game and talk a little bit about the past is because next Sunday is Remembrance Sunday, and that's a day when we remember all the people who died during the war. And unfortunately, most computer games are based on war and fighting and battle, because unfortunately in our world there's really so much war and so much fighting. So I'll just talk to you a bit more about Remembrance Day. So I'll turn off the computer here and we'll do that. Well guys, I've another game to show you, and this time this is a board game, so it's played on a board, it's not played on the computer. And this game is called Diplomacy, and diplomacy is all about people talking to one another and trying to find solutions to problems without resorting to violence. And so that's the object of this game. Now, the interesting thing about this game, Diplomacy, is it has a very good playing board, and it's a lovely map of Europe at the time of the start of the First World War, which was in the year 1914. But just before I show you that, these are some of the playing pieces. You have a little bullet to represent your army, and you have little ships to represent battleships, of course, and a navy. But the unusual thing about the diplomacy game is that there's no dice. You have to talk to your opponents throughout the game. You have to try and communicate and keep talking to each other throughout the game. So it's a most unusual game. So it doesn't involve rolling dice at all. You simply have to keep talking to one another. But enough about that. I'll just show you this playing board. Okay guys, this is the diplomacy game board. This is where you put your pieces on the board and play the game. And as you can see, it's really very colourful. You can play different countries. And we'll start here in the centre. There's Germany. Okay, and then beside it in blue there is France. Just above there we see England. There's the Scandinavian countries over here, Russia. Down here we have Turkey. And right in the centre here we have a large country which doesn't exist anymore, Austria-Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So there's Austria and there's Hungary, but at the time of the First World War, which was the year 1914, Austria and Hungary had a big empire in much of Central Europe. And then Italy, of course, everyone recognises because of the shape of Italy. You can't miss Italy. So there we have Italy there in green. So everything looks really very colourful, and that for playing the game. But the reality, of course, is that war is very dark and violent and really quite terrible. And so this game is set in the year 1914 at the outbreak of the war, and much of the fighting in the actual First World War took place along here. There's Belgium and France. So between Germany and France, an awful lot of the fighting took place along here, and an awful lot of Irishmen were involved as well. We see here Ireland is the same colour as England in this map, and that's because at the time Ireland was part of the United Kingdom, forming one country. So that's why Ireland on this game is coloured the same as England, and an awful lot of Irish men went to fight in the war. Now, here's a picture, and these are Irish soldiers in the British Army, and there they are in what's called a trench. I'll just talk to you a bit about the trench in just a second, but these are members of the Royal Irish Rifles. So these are Irishmen who've gone to fight in the war. And as I mentioned, there an awful lot of the fighting took place here in Belgium on the border with France, between Germany and France. So an awful lot of hundreds of thousands of men were killed along this front. And what had happened is the soldiers had to dig trenches when the fighting began to protect themselves. And a trench is a big, deep piece of earth. You see that? These are what are called sandbags. They protect the soldiers from bullets. And there's the walls of the trenches there. So they dug really deep into the earth to protect themselves. So the trenches were really incredibly deep. And you see how tall the men are and how they're protected by the walls of the trench. So what they would do is they would climb up and they would shoot from the top of the trenches at the opposing army. And it was called the Great War because at the time no one had seen a conflict like it in the year 1914. Before that, battles would take place, unfortunately, between countries, but nothing on this scale had ever happened before, with all of these countries fighting, with Russia, Austria, Hungary, Italy, Germany, France, England, Turkey and other countries all involved. No one had seen conflict on this scale before, and so soldiers came from all over the world, and there was fighting on many continents. We see here these are Sikh soldiers from India, and here they are parading in England before they go to fight in the trenches. You see this lady here is giving a flower to one of the Sikh soldiers there from India. Just a good look token, and to thank them for their sacrifice and the fact that they've come all the way from India to help England fight Germany. Now, I mentioned about the trenches. So the trenches were very, very dark, terrible places where the soldiers were fighting. Now, have you seen these flowers before? These are called poppies. And after the war, when all the fighting ended in the year 1918, all these flowers, these beautiful poppies, blossomed on what were the battlefields of Europe. So the poppy has become a symbol of remembering those who died in war. It was really quite incredible. From the darkness of the trenches, there we are, see the terrible conditions, the dirt, the mud, and the awful fighting and the bullets and bombs going off, that when the war ended, there's this beautiful scene. So today, if you visit parts of Flanders, which is in Belgium, or northern France, and you walk along the battlefields, you can still see the walls of the trenches, but everywhere these beautiful flowers grow, and it looks so peaceful and nice now. But it's hard to believe that at the time so many people were killed on the battlefields of Europe. So that's why the poppy, as I say, is the symbol of remembrance, and people today wear poppies to remember the soldiers who died in the Great War and other wars. So the Great War was the First World War, and that took place between the year 1914 and the year 1918. The Second World War began in 1939 and it ended in 1945 in Europe and 1946 in the Pacific, when the Americans defeated Japan. Guys, I have here a poppy wreath. A wreath is a circle of flowers that we just put together, and these poppies are a reminder to us of the sacrifice of all of those people in so many conflicts who gave their lives to protect us, to keep us safe, and above all they went to war hoping that we would never ever have to fight or to see a battle again. Now sadly, war continues to blight our world, so the poppy to us remains a reminder of the sacrifice of those who gave their lives for us, but also a symbol of hope that we won't ever have to have wars again. So we hope and pray that our world will be free of violence, disharmony, and especially war. So I'd just like to finish up, boys and girls, by reading to you a poem, and it's called The Veteran. And a veteran is someone who has fought in a war. The Veteran by Margaret Postgate Cole. We came upon him sitting in the sun, blinded by war and left, and past the fence there came young soldiers from the Hand and Flower, asking advice of his experience. And he said this and that, and told them tales, and all the nightmares of each empty head blew into air. Then, hearing us beside, poor chaps, how did they know what it's like, he said. And we stood there and watched him as he sat, turning his sockets where they went away, until it came to one of us to ask, "And you're how old?" 19, the 3rd of May. Very sad, incredible that that young man at just 19 years of age was a veteran of a terrible conflict. And so many of the young men who fought in the Great War, the First World War, were just teenagers, boys of 15, 16, 17 years of age. For some of them, the first time they'd ever been to a foreign country, and arriving in the fields of Belgium and France and witnessing all the horrors of the war. So we hope and pray that there will be an end to conflict in our world, and that the poppy will remain a symbol of hope, that, please God, justice, truth and harmony will reign in our world. Finally, just of course to say, boys and girls, the reason we celebrate Remembrance Day in November is because that's when the Great War, the First World War, ended. It ended on the 11th of November in the year 1918, so 11 of 11, but at 11 o'clock. So 11, 11, 11. So that's the significance of that date. Boys and girls, I hope you've enjoyed this Remembrance Day assembly, and we'll finish with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. God bless you all. Bye-bye.